On this episode, we talk to activist and musician Steve Valk. He'll tell us how a childhood interest in writing turned into a career in journalism, and what he learned as an activist by reaching across the aisle with a politician. Welcome to Creative Conversations with Generation Jones, a podcast where we interview real people of a certain age.
Not the rich and famous.
Folks who've been living a life of creativity.
Some do it for a living, and some do it because it fills their soul. But they all have great stories and pearls of wisdom to share with you, with me, with everybody.
Yeah, baby.
Hi, I'm Stephanie.
And I'm Maria.
And we're your hosts for Creative Conversations with Generation Jones.
Thanks for joining us.
This episode, we will be talking to Steve Valk.
Hello.
Former
Newspaperman.
Activist who wanted to change the world, and backyard musician. Welcome, Steve.
Well, thanks for having me. It's great to be with you guys today.
So, our first question that we ask every single person is, what is your favorite cocktail?
Well, so the one that we made today is one that I concocted a few years back up in Virginia. It's called the Vienna Firefly, and it's 1 part cherry-infused vodka, 1 part tonic water over ice, a little squeeze of lime. And the reason I call it the Vienna Firefly is because cherry vodka was the only liquor we had in the house. I made it. We sat in the backyard and drank these things like they were going out of style. And as the evening came on, these fireflies started coming up from the grass. And as it got darker and darker, they rose up into the sky and kind of mixed in with the stars up there. And so, of course, we're loaded. So this is an incredible display. And I mean, it was kind of a mystical experience for us. And I thought, wow, I've got to give this drink a name. And so I thought, well, you know, the fireflies, I'm in Vienna, Virginia. We're going to call it the Vienna Firefly.
And I have to say, it's quite delicious.
It is so good. You know what we're going to do? We're going to try it. So let's do a little cheers.
All right.
You know,
Cheers.
Clinky.
Clinky, clinky.
There we go. Boy, I'm
It's
almost
strong
ready for a
but
refresher here.
delicious.
It is good. Indeed it is.
By the way, I did not realize that there was a generation. I just assumed I was a baby boomer. I did not know that there was this whole
Jen
segment.
Jones, baby. Yeah.
Exactly,
Special.
this Generation Jones. So I don't know. I guess I feel a little more special now that I'm part of this Generation Jones thing. What's the vibe of Generation Jones?
Totally cool, man.
I mean, we were not really boomers because we didn't grow up.
We
in
weren't
the
born
era.
right after World War II.
No.
We had TVs in our
TVs
houses,
in our
not
yeah.
just radios.
You know, we were a little snarkier. We were a cooler generation.
Cooler,
then.
and it sort of had a little more technology,
Yeah.
you know, a little bit.
We grew up
Yeah.
in the 60s and we're teenagers in the 70s. You know, we were too young to go to
Vietnam.
or
World War II. Jesus Christ.
wait, cut this whole part. What was the music thing?
Woodstock.
Woodstock. We were too
Woodstock.
young for
Oh, you're
Woodstock.
talking-
I was 14.
Yeah,
probably.
you were too
I
young
could
for
have been
Woodstock.
young
See,
for that,
we're,
yeah.
we're and we can't remember shit right
Right,
now.
and we can't remember shit.
because
Isn't there an acronym for that?
because we smoked too much weed.
CRS. Yeah, I can't remember shit.
Can't-
Yeah.
See, that is a great tagline, Generation Jones. We can't remember shit. For season 3, that's going to be our new tagline.
All right.
Okay.
Budding boom.
All right.
So, Steve, what did you want to be when you were a little kid?
Believe it or not, I wanted to be a priest. So I was born and raised Catholic, and I became an altar boy. I mean, I was an altar boy back when they was doing the mass in Latin.
You're from Jersey, right?
I'm from New Jersey,
Yeah.
right. I'm in a parish that had like 6 priests in it. You know,
Wow.
6 confessionals. You know, very little waiting, so. Yeah, and you always kind of had to stake out, you know, the right priest to make sure you didn't get too much penance. You did not want to see the Monsignor. You know, you wanted to see the guy who was going to give you 3 Hail Marys and boom, that's it.
Yeah, you didn't want to have to do 2 or 3 rosaries because that would take
Oh,
a
no.
lot of time,
You know,
way
that's
too
a-
much time.
You grew up.
I did grow
Yeah.
up Catholic. I
Catholic,
did.
didn't you?
That's a lot of time on your knees, but yeah. So when I was a kid, I wanted to be a priest, you know, and then I hit puberty, and then all of a sudden, this, you know, the ramifications of celibacy took on a whole new dimension for me. I thought, maybe I'll do something else, And I got interested in astronomy when I was a kid, and I had a telescope and all that. I loved doing that. And later on, as I got to be a young teen, I was thinking architecture. I like to design things. But then late in high school, I really developed a love for writing, for doing poetry and writing short stories and stuff like that. And at the time I was in high school up in New Jersey, I could get the New York Times delivered to my desk every morning for 5 cents a copy.
Wow.
Yeah.
In high school? Wow.
So, yeah.
Wow.
So,
What high school student reads the New York Times?
Well,
You did.
Yeah,
I did.
this
I
guy
did.
right here.
Right. Yeah, so I really kind of developed this love of writing and a love of news. I couldn't get enough news, and I decided, well, I'll go into journalism, and that's what I did. Yeah.
So is that what you did in college?
Yep. I went to University of South Carolina. I grew up in New Jersey, graduated high school there. My family moved down to South Carolina, so I applied to Rutgers and University of South Carolina. I was such a screw-off in high school that Rutgers would not have me. So okay, it looks like I'm going to South Carolina. I majored in journalism. I thought I was going to go into broadcasting. Dick Cavett, just kind of he was one of my heroes in terms of being somebody who did a really incisive interview with people, and I worked at the campus radio station and all that, and I became like the program director, and then in the middle of all the Watergate stuff and Nixon being under fire and all that, some conservative outfit sent us an editorial tape kind of defending Nixon, and I was stupid enough to write the guy back, with this profanity laced, letter about us, forget it, pal. We're not running this, and it was pretty bad.
You were an activist way
Right?
back then.
Well, this guy went to the president of the university, demanding that I be expelled.
Oh, come on.
from the university and all that, So they had to do something. So they had this like student faculty committee that oversaw student communications, like the radio station and the newspaper and all that. And so they decided, well, okay, it looks like you're gonna have to leave the radio station.
Oh, so they did. They kicked you off the radio station?
They kicked me out of the radio station.
Wow.
And so right next door to the radio station was the student newspaper. So I went down the hall to the next door and started working with the newspaper. That's how I ended up in print media instead of broadcasting.
Got it. And when you were in college, that's when you had your little stint with streaking.
Oh, that was so much fun. Oh my God, yeah. I mean, it was just one of these weird crazes that just kind of happened organically. We were up in the radio station, and I remember somebody saying, "Hey, there's some guy running around campus naked," and then there's another one, So it started off just with a few randos, running around without their clothes on, and then it became this competition between universities, between different schools and everything. So we decided, we were going to try to get the record for the most, for the highest number of streakers out there. So there were like
at one time,
right. So there was like thousands of people out in the street there in front of the campus, in front of the student center. And so we had to have somebody actually officially count it off, how many people were in this thing. So we were actually lined up over by the library. All of us were lined up naked over by the library so that we can kind of get counted off. And we went running through this crowd of people. They would sort of part like the Red Sea or something, maybe a little lane that was about maybe 7 or 8 feet wide. And we ran through this crowd in the street. And as I'm running through the crowd, my girlfriend, she's right on the front line watching all this stuff, and I go running. She didn't know I was going to do this, and I went running by, and she goes, "Steve," So, and then, I think a few weeks later or something like that, we were up visiting her family up in North Carolina, and her mother, who really she kind of rolls with things. She was pretty cool. She said, "Should I ask him?" Not. So she said, "Steve, was that you I saw in the newspaper?"
Oh no,
no. Apparently there was a picture of somebody. Might have looked like me. I can't say for sure it was me, but But anyway, my girlfriend's mother, saw a picture that might have been me in the newspaper.
Now we have to admit we did go.
We looked this
on
up.
Google and looked it up.
Uh-huh.
There were a lot of butts.
A lot of
naked
right.
butts. A lot of naked butts. Of course, our butts change. We didn't know if it was you or not.
Yeah.
It was hard to tell.
Hard to tell.
So there may or may not be photographic evidence. We're not sure.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So when you got out of school,
Mm-hmm.
where'd you go to work?
So I've really been incredibly fortunate. I mean, most people, they have to do these extensive job searches and everything. And, I like to say that there must be somebody up there that likes me, because the Jackson Clarion Ledger actually came to the University of South Carolina to recruit graduates from the senior class to go to work for them. And I interviewed with them, and I got a job at the Clarion Ledger in 1977.
Wow.
I worked for a year there. And so what I did mostly page design and layout, writing headlines, editing, that kind of thing. I remember my journalism professor, I said, "Hey, the quickest way to get to work on a major newspaper is through the copy desk." And so I made a little note of that. And I also figured out that my skills as a designer were not skills that everybody else had. I mean, when something, it's really weird when something comes easy to you, you just figure, oh, everybody can do this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
No, that's not the case. Sometimes you're good at something that a lot of people really can't do, and that was the case with newspaper design for me, and that's what got me the job in Jackson. And then less than about a year or so later, my professor calls me up and says, "Hey, the Atlanta Constitution is looking for people who do what you do. Give this guy a call." And they interviewed me and everything. And I thought, oh well, they'll probably just say, "Okay, well, thanks for coming in. We'll let you know." But no, the managing editor looks at my stuff and he says, "Well, I got one more question, and oh, what's that? When can you start?" And I just about fell out of my chair. Here I am. I'm 23 years old. Going to work for the biggest newspaper in the Southeast. Now there were two things going on here. One was I was good, yes. But the other thing was that I was just a year out of college.
So you were cheap.
You were cheap.
They got me pretty darn cheap. Yeah.
Good
So
and cheap is good.
They
They
got the bargain version of Steve at that point. But anyway, so yeah, there I was. I came to Atlanta in '78 and started working at the Journal.
And you did the layout too, right?
I did, yeah. The
this
layout
was before.
right.
This was like
Computers
where you had to do it
Oh
physically.
yeah. You had to do. Yeah, you didn't do this stuff on computer. I mean, and for anybody who was like, born after 1990, you can't imagine what it took to get a newspaper out. I mean, at least we had at this point word processor computers where you can actually write stories and edit them. Although the reporters were still typing their stories on
typewriters,
on IBM
yeah.
Selectric typewriters.
Yep.
They would do it like triple carbon with triple space, and then the editing had to be actually done by hand and then sent down to the composing room, and then the people who set the type then would actually fix the copy that was sent down according to the edits that were on the pages there. And it was really crazy. And they really didn't have what we call pagination, being able to compose an entire page on the computer. They didn't really have that until early 90s.
Wow.
Yeah.
That long?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, because I actually just saw a video of so when I was at CNN in the mid to late 80s, when I started there,
Right.
and I actually just saw somebody had shot some video back when we were in our 20s, and and you can hear the typewriters clicking in the background, click, click, click. And of course it was an open newsroom, right? And so the anchors are sitting there at the anchor desk, and you can hear The typewriter's going. I mean,
Wow.
that was the way it was. Now that would be weird, but that was the way it was.
Oh, newspapers used to be the noisiest places in the world. Between the typewriters and the wire machines,
Right.
were also going
Teletype.
ding ding ding,
Yep.
and all this, and the phones were always ringing.
Right?
Yeah,
and people
yeah.
swearing. It was
Right.
also very smoky, too.
Oh, yeah.
Because when
Oh,
I
yeah.
was at CNN in the 80s, it was like there was smoke. We were smoking
yeah.
everywhere. We're putting our
God.
cigarettes down. There were burn marks on every single
Yep.
table. Burn marks on the tape decks. There were burn marks. Yeah.
No, the
Oh, my God.
ashtrays did not leave the newsrooms. I think until probably around 90 or so. Yeah, that's
long, really?
Oh yeah,
was it?
yeah.
Yeah.
Throughout the
Jesus.
80s, you
Wow.
could smoke in the newsroom.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Yeah. So can you tell us briefly, like, what exactly your job was?
I was the guy who put the jigsaw puzzle together. So what would happen is, every page in the newspaper is composed of stories and headlines and pictures and graphics and stuff like that. And so in consultation with some editors, we would decide what would go on, particularly like a cover page. I worked in the early years, I worked mostly in the features department. What eventually became the living section. I think back then it was People, Etc. or something back then. And so you would get, we'd decide with the editor, okay, here are the stories that are going to go on that cover. Here is the art, the graphics that are going to go there. And here, just knock yourself out. And so I would sit there with a gridded sheet of paper that was, broken up into like 6 columns or so with the inches marked off and all that. And I would actually draw out what was going on the page. I would say, okay, here's the
lot of
story.
work.
Here's the story at the top. Here's the headline. Here's the size of okay, this is going to be a 48-point headline. Then you had to take the photos. Again, this is before pagination, and so you had to actually take the photos and crop them with a marker, with sort of a crayon type pencil. You crop them and put a little tag on it, send it down to the composing room where they would make what was called an engraving of the photo to a certain size that would fit on the page. So you would do all that stuff. All of these little pieces had to come together. It was kind of like I was at the end of the funnel. All this stuff kind of getting dumped into create what I call the daily miracle. When you think about it, I mean,
This went on every day.
Every
This was
day,
not like
right?
This was not like
Every
a once
day.
a week
No.
paper. This
there's
is
probably
every
enough
day.
there's enough copy in a daily newspaper each day to fill a book. So this institution, this business is publishing what the equivalent of a book a day.
It's amazing.
With over 100 people involved in the process, from reporters to editors to layout editors to copy editors to the printers down in the composing room who would cut and paste this stuff up on a page, and then it would go to a press room. But it was fun. It was exciting. It was really exciting on an election night.
I'll bet.
Oh, yeah.
Which leads me to this. I believe it was an election night that this happened. So on a big news night, particularly for the features section, they wanted to keep what we call replates to a minimum between like the first edition and the next edition. So if there was anything that was like a minor fix or something like that, forget it on a big news night. So me and this other copy editor, we're looking at the first edition. I said, okay, don't worry about any small stuff here. We want to keep, the fixes to a minimum. And Charles McEwen, this wonderful character, very proper, with an extremely droll sense of humor. And he said, well, Steve, I think we need to fix the Dear Abby headline. And I said, oh, why? Because it says Dead Abby. So I think, oh no. So fortunately, it was what was called the 3-star edition. I think it ended up in like newspaper racks down in Savannah or something
Oh,
like
my
that.
God.
So it
That's
did
all
go
right.
out like that.
It actually went.
That's
It went out like that, but it only. I mean, you're talking about 150,000 circulation, and this you may be talking about 10 to 20,000 copies or something
God,
like that
that's a riot.
going down to the coast. So yeah, we decided that was worth fixing.
So on that note, let's take a little break here. Have another little sip of our drink.
All right.
Refresh them, maybe.
Yep. Up here, let's clinky clink.
Clinky clink.
Clinky clink. One more
Clinkety
clink.
clink. And we'll be right back.
All right, don't go away. So, how did you get involved in activism?
Well, from the time that I was a teenager, I was looking around and I was seeing all the problems in the world, and I wanted to make a difference with it. And I kind of fell on journalism as the way that I could make a difference. My thing was, if you could just get the right information to the right people at the right time, you could solve most of the problems in the world. But unfortunately, what I discovered was a few years into my career is that the purpose of a newspaper is not to save the world. The purpose of a newspaper is to make money for the people who own the newspaper.
Exactly.
Right. And so I don't know why this came as a surprise to me, but
Because you were young,
right? Because I was
idealistic.
young and
Yeah.
idealistic.
Yeah.
Occasionally, those two purposes would cross paths, but I guess I kind of got all swept up in the Woodward Bernstein thing that was happening in the early 70s with Watergate, as a lot of aspiring journalists were at the time. But from a making a difference standpoint, it was kind of disappointing. So I started pouring myself more into creative endeavors like songwriting. That's how I met Stephanie.
Right, that's right. That's right, in theater. That's right. I forgot about that.
I was the star of a really weird play that was written by your friend. You were the makeup person.
That's right.
And so you did my makeup person. That
It was about a plane crash. And so
Oh.
all the people had to look like they were all banged up and
Oh,
bloody.
special
and,
effects.
Yeah, special effects.
Oh yeah.
yeah.
From the Master Halloween
Miss
makeup
Halloween
artist
here.
here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's how we met. That's how we met. Okay.
Okay.
But I discovered pretty early that I really didn't have the chops to be an actor. So I ended up doing lights.
What other creative things were you doing then?
Well, at the time, I was a songwriter, and I wrote probably half of the songs that were in a short-lived dinner theater at Ansley Mall. And they did this production of a thing called, I think it was called Atlanta Proud or something like that. So I wrote like half the songs that were in that musical, and including one about Braves pitcher Phil Necro. I wrote a little song called, Set him up for Nuxie, he was one of a kind. The butterfly pitch would get him every time. I tell you quite frankly, I'm sad he's a Yankee. Set him up, Nuxie, he's a friend of mine. Yeah, so I was writing songs and stuff. So I've had a 4-track recorder for a little while, and then I went big with an 8-track reel-to-reel.
8-track.
Oh, 8-track
Yeah.
back in the day, and I started writing and recording songs.
But you've always kind of played music for creativity and
Right.
with, like local, like neighborhood bands and people you knew.
Well, and as a matter of fact, I had a friend named Matthew Shelton. He was a songwriter. He played guitar and he played a lot of harmonica. And so for a brief period, he and his girlfriend, who became his wife, Maureen, and my wife, Sarah, we were all part of this little group called Matthew and the Mystics.
I remember seeing you
Yeah.
at Moto's one time.
George's,
yeah.
George had a place
At
and
a restaurant.
and we
I
played
remember
there.
seeing you guys play there.
Right, and I would do hand percussion. I didn't have enough coordination to actually get my feet involved in the drumming. It was just hands.
So what were you playing?
I was playing the conga drum,
Okay.
right, and doing a little singing with it and so forth. And later on, when I started going back to church at the Shrine of the Immaculate Conception, then I started singing in the choir up there, and that's been a lot of fun.
Was there something that your wife knew about you just from looking at you back then?
As Sarah says, I was the kind of guy who would wear his heart on his sleeve,
Literally, because
Literally, right. Because I actually have a tattoo on my arm from a girl I fell in love with when I was 17 years old.
That you still have on your arm.
Yes.
That's still there, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, are there any other tattoos on any of your arms?
Not on my arms. I actually, for our 25th anniversary, I got Sarah's name tattooed right over my heart.
Oh, so lovely. But you didn't get rid of the original one.
No,
You're still
no,
wearing
no.
the original girlfriend's name.
She's fine with that. She's
Okay,
fine.
okay.
It's part of who I am.
That's right.
Okay.
It's part of your history.
It says something about how, when I commit to something, I really commit to
Right.
it.
And what is that on? What does that tattoo say?
This one here says iris.
Okay, so
And
that's also a flower. Not
It is.
only
It is a
your
flower. If I
girlfriend's
was-
name. Yeah.
Some people have suggested, hey, why don't you just add an H to it, and you could tell people you went to Notre Dame.
Irish.
Right,
H
yeah,
at the end.
Yeah, right.
That's funny. Yeah.
So,
Yeah. So did she get you involved in activism or in volunteering with something?
yes, she did. She did. One day, she says, "Oh, can you give me a ride?" And this was at a time when I didn't even have a car. All I had was a motorcycle. So she had no car. I had a motorcycle.
Before Uber or Lyft.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So says, "Oh, I've got to go to this meeting." I said, "Oh, what is it all?" "Oh, it's this group about ending hunger and poverty." And she told me a little bit about it. And I looked at her and said, "Oh, well, that's nice. I'm glad you're doing that." And so
Oh, nice for you.
right. And it's sure, I'll give you a ride. So I drop her off at the meeting and then come pick her up later on. And, a few months later, and they would have monthly meetings. And eventually I got curious. What are they doing at these things? So I went to a meeting. There's an organization called Results that advocates for ending hunger and poverty. At the meeting, there was a conference call. So at the time, if you wanted to do a call that everybody in the room could hear, you had like a little speaker box from Radio Shack, where
Wow.
that you
Yeah,
would
yeah.
plug the phone into,
Yeah,
and and so we're on this call where there's like people listening from all over the United States, and at the end of the call, they would actually do like a little roll call, to say, okay, say your city, how many people are in the room, and what you're planning to do. Are you going to get how many letters to the editor written, or how many letters to your member of Congress, or something like that. And as they went around to all these different cities, and people saying who was in the room and what they were going to do and all that, it kind of started to make some sense to me that, wow, this could actually work. This is how you can put your democracy
You had an epiphany.
to good use. Oh, that wasn't the big epiphany, but that was the first epiphany.
Okay.
But that was like, yeah, I think this could actually work, and so I started getting involved, and I saw that that my skills as a communicator and in the media could play a very big role in influencing the decision makers who were deciding how much money was going to go into things that actually made a difference in people around the world. Things like child survival, measles immunizations, U.S. contribution to UNICEF, tuberculosis, microcredit loans for the poor, things like that. And so I started volunteering with Results, and eventually I was the one who would end up writing what were then what we call the editorial packets. And so an editorial packet was like basically kind of like a little position paper on an issue that our volunteers would take to the newspaper. And that time, the internet really didn't exist. So these editorial packets were actually printed out and sent by mail to groups all around the country. And then they would take them to newspapers and say, would you consider writing an editorial about this? Not an op-ed or a column, but like the official view of the newspaper. Right. And so we'd get them to write, dozens of editorials around the country, asking that Congress increase the funding for child survival, or to start funding microcredit programs and stuff like that. So I really began to get the sense that I was sort of fulfilling my purpose what I was really called to be
That
doing.
was your destiny.
In terms of having an impact on making the world a better place.
And that was journalism. Through journalism, you were making a difference.
Right.
Yes.
But it was journalism as an advocate at that point.
And how long did you work with them?
I volunteered with them for about 25 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
It started in
Wow.
'85,
Okay.
and probably all the way up until about 2010 or so.
What did you learn from all those years of volunteering with advocate groups?
You have to let go of being right if you want to make a difference. And when I say that, this comes as somebody who, as a young man, I was very self-righteous about,
Right.
Okay, these are the things that are, screwed up in the world, and we have to do this. And if you don't agree with me, then you're just a dipshit, and that sort of thing.
Right.
And so in 1985, we met with this congressman here in Georgia, Pat Swindoll. He's a Republican. At the time, there was this big famine in Ethiopia, and we went and we actually had a meeting with him, one of the first groups to meet with him, and we asked him to vote in favor of this famine relief for Ethiopia. We're talking about, we are the world and all that stuff, right? And he said, no, I'm not going to do that. I don't think the government should be involved in this. There's 435 members in the House of Representatives. 15 of them voted against famine aid for Ethiopia.
Wow. And he was one of them.
He was one of them, and he got up and made a speech about why he was doing it. So we thought, oh my God, forget about trying to influence this guy. We kind of felt like the sports fans whose team is so bad that when they go to the game, they wear, like a paper bag over their head with the eyes cut out. That's how we felt about him. And so the guy who was the founder of Results, we had a call with him. Told him, hey, we might as well just wait until the next election and see if somebody else gets in there. And then Sam says, yeah, you could do that, but in the meantime, there's like 40,000 children dying a day from preventable causes. Are you sure you want to wait that long? And I go, okay, I get it. So what do you suggest? And I said, well, there's this thing that another group did, for their member of Congress, where they had a prayer for them. And so we started saying this thing called a prayer for Pat Swindoll. And the prayer wasn't, like, dear God, Pat Swindoll is just such an asshole. Please change him. That was not the prayer. The prayer was, God, help us to change how we see him in order to make the connection that we have to get him to do the things that are necessary. And eventually, we actually started to believe this. And we would see him at these little get-togethers in the district they call Chat with Pat. And we would just go up there with a smile on our face and, shake his hand and say, Pat, really appreciate you being out here and listening to us and everything. Just want to give you a little education here about this thing called microcredit, where people can get small loans and start businesses to move their families out of poverty. And he was really interested in it. He really kind of liked it. So we did this a few times. And then the first bill in 1986, the first bill for funding microcredit got introduced in Congress. And we decided, okay, we're going to get him to co-sponsor this bill. These little Chat with Pat things have been going really well. I think he might co-sponsor it. John Lewis ended up being one of the co-sponsors on it. And so we had a meeting with him. It went great. We all did our little spiels, and he was kind of cute. He was sitting there. He was actually sitting on. He was sitting on his. We brought in a little TV to show him a video, and he was actually like sitting on his desk with his knees propped up, watching this video and everything. So we come to the time to ask him, would you co-sponsor this bill to start funding microcredit? And usually the answer that you'll get from a politician on something like this is, well, this looks good. I'm going to have my staff take a look at it. I need to take a look. At this, we didn't even have a bill to show him. He was just going by what we were telling him. Right. The relationship with him, the respect and trust that we had built up with him was to the point where, without a second's hesitation, when we asked him to co-sponsor it, he said, I'd be delighted to co-sponsor this
Wow.
bill.
Wow.
You get more with honey than with vinegar, right?
Exactly,
Absolutely.
exactly.
Yeah.
So we're all about to fall out of our chairs at this point. And then I remember, oh, yeah, before we did this, I told Sarah, I said, I think he's going to co-sponsor. And when he does, I'm going to see if he'll do an op-ed about it, about why he's doing it. And everything. And Sarah said, oh, I don't know. You might be pushing your luck on that one. And I said, no. You know, once he commits, in for a penny, in for a pound. What the hell? So my head is spinning after him saying, I'm going to co-sponsor this bill. And then I remember, oh, yeah, I'm going to ask him about the op-ed. So just as the words are forming in my mouth, he says to us, this is such a great idea. The public really needs to know about this.
Ooh.
I've got a column that appears in the DeKalb News Sun every 2 weeks. I was wondering if maybe you could write up something about this and give it to my staff, and we'll run it as my column. So I looked at Sarah, with this kind of shit-eating grin on my face. And then I looked back at Pat and said, Pat, that's a great idea.
Exactly. That's a great idea.
So here the guy voted against famine aid in '85, and a year or two later, he's one of the first co-sponsors for a microcredit bill in Congress, and I'm his ghostwriter.
Wow.
And so that to me changed my whole view of how you look at things.
So to change the world, you had to change yourself, right?
Exactly.
Your perception of how
Right.
to change it.
Right. You can't have this, it's us against them. We're all in this together, and we just have to find a way to kind of respect and trust each other, that we're human beings. We want the best for each other. Let's talk about the problems and see where we can find the common ground to solve those. Yeah.
Yeah.
Good. So tell us about the Citizens Climate Lobby.
So I leave the newspaper in 2009. I take a buyout, got absolutely no idea what the hell I'm going to do. So I called up Sam, and he says, oh, talk to Marshall. He's just started this group called Citizens Climate Lobby. And Marshall I knew because he was a results volunteer, and I had seen him at results conferences. He was a very well-off guy, and he started a microcredit program down in Mexico. And he asked me a couple of times to write an op-ed for him for the San Diego paper. And I thought, oh yeah, sure, I'll do it. And I didn't charge him anything, I just wrote it for him and all that. And it's just one of those weird things where you do something without thinking that you're going to get anything, back for it. But then years later, here I am talking on the phone to this guy who's just starting this organization, and I say, hey, do you need somebody to do media work? And at this point, this guy has one staffer, the executive director.
Wow.
Okay. and he says, well, yeah, I do. And that was it. I started working for Citizens Climate Lobby. I did more than media work. At that point, we didn't have a very big staff, so I did all kinds of stuff. I went traveling around all up and down east of the Mississippi, starting Citizens Climate Lobby chapters. And eventually we went from about a dozen chapters that were mostly in California to now we've got about 450
Wow.
chapters
Wow.
covering just about every congressional district in the country. And our main thing has been trying to get a price on carbon. It's called carbon fee and dividend. And the dividend is that you take the revenue from that carbon tax and you give it to everybody as an equal share, so that when energy costs go up because of the carbon price, the money that people get back will, in most cases, more than cover what they're paying. But the whole idea is to create the incentive to move away. And it's a very powerful market in incentive. If you look at cigarettes, back when I was a kid, when I was a teenager, half the country smoked.
Yeah.
At least half the country. But cigarettes were like 50 cents a pack.
Right.
Well, with all the taxes now, cigarettes are like $5-6 a pack. What? I'm going to spend a couple of $1,000s a year on a product that's probably going to give me cancer? No.
Yeah.
So putting a tax on the things that we don't want actually works. So that's the whole idea. And we came very close to actually getting that included in the big bill that passed last year, the Inflation Reduction Act. We're one vote shy in the Senate of getting it included in that. Guess who the one vote was?
Yeah. Oh, let's not even go there. Let's
No.
not even go there.
No. But we're trying to get it done in a bipartisan, and it's a tough issue to be bipartisan on. But if you want to get policies enacted that are actually going to endure, where one Congress passes it and then the next Congress says, oh no, screw that, we're going to throw it out. You have to get some bipartisan buy-in on it. You have to get people on both sides of the aisle to agree on things. Otherwise, well, particularly when it comes to executive actions and stuff like that, those can easily be undone when Congress, or when an administration changes hands, as we saw in 2016.
So you have done a lot of good advocacy work.
Mm-hmm.
Along with that, you've had music.
Yes.
In your personal life, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
How has making music affected you through your life?
I've always had this, strong affinity for music. It's one of the arts that just really touches the soul. It does. And it was fun for me to be a songwriter and to sing and accompany me on the guitar with the three chords that I knew. And
but you've played in a lot of like backyard bands, like
right.
So
Stuff. Yes. I've had kind of music attention deficit disorder, where I would get infatuated with an instrument, like a flute or a saxophone or something like that, and I'd go and buy them, and I'd get just to the point where I would stop making bad sounds, but never get to the point where I would actually master these things. Although in the neighborhood band that we play,
which is called
the St. Charles Stains.
Stains.
And it stains with three Z's on the end.
Of course it is.
So that's what makes it edgy.
Because we in Generation Jones are nothing if not edgy, right?
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. But I got my chops up on the saxophone enough so that when we do Born to Run,
Mm-hmm.
I sing the song, and I also play the little sax solo in the middle. So I'm both
yes.
Bruce Springsteen and Clarence Clemens.
All right.
So many talents.
All right, I got one last question before we do our little game show.
Okay.
What advice would you tell a young person wanting to help change the world to get into advocacy? Would you advise? What would be your best advice?
Well, I've already mentioned you got to let go of being right if you want to make a difference. So that's number one. But number two is to just say yes to the things that you can say yes to. I mean, the temptation is always, oh, I don't have time for this. I don't have time for that. Really, if something gets put in front of you and it looks interesting, and there's no good reason to say no, go ahead and do it. Because you just never know where it's going to lead. You guys don't know where this podcast is.
Well, that's true.
That's right.
Yeah.
But to some kind of sponsorship, probably. I mean, come on, sponsors.
But I just think of all, where I am in my life and what I've been able to do. And it was just a lot of the little things that I said yes to that led me to, where I am now and the fact that I've been able to fulfill my purpose to make a difference. So don't get hung up on the idea that if you want to be an advocate or if you want to make a difference in the world, that it has to be your daytime job. You can do a lot of stuff with just 10, 15, 20 hours a week.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have to say, I feel very hopeful with the youth of today.
Yeah.
I think they're doing a lot of good advocacy, and it's getting better.
Mm-hmm. No, a lot
I
of
think
great.
they're going to save the world.
Mm-hmm.
These Gen Zers that everybody says bad things about. I don't think so. I think they're awesome.
I agree.
I
Go
think they're going to pull our asses out of the
Yep,
fire.
I think so too.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
so too. And on that note, we're going to move to our little game show.
Oh boy.
Do-do-do. Okay, it's called What Decade Did This Come From? So we're going to give you a word or a phrase that came from the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, or above.
Uh-huh.
And you're going to tell us which decade you
decade?
think they came from. We're going to
Okay.
give you 3, and then we're going to give you a modern word that the kids use now and see if you know what it means.
All right.
Don't worry, we didn't know what it
No,
was.
that's
so-
okay.
Oh, God.
That's okay. All right. Number 1, drop science. What
Drop-
decade did drop science come from?
Drop science.
Do you know what it means?
I don't, but that sounds like something from the 80s.
Ding,
Yep.
ding, ding, ding. Good job.
Sharing knowledge,
Indeed.
yeah.
Okay, all right.
Yep.
Okay.
This one I never heard of, but Ick House.
Ick House.
Mm-hmm.
Ooh. Ick House.
Tell them what it means.
It means an attractive, curvy girl. I don't know.
Oh, no. That would be a brick house.
Whoa!
No, it said Ick
Ick
House.
House.
Oh, maybe they forgot to put the
Yeah.
BR on there.
Brick house.
Brick
Yeah,
house.
brick. Okay,
Yeah.
we're
No,
talking.
but you're right.
Yeah.
Because I read this thing. I said, Ick House.
Yeah.
I've never heard of
Yeah,
Ick
yeah.
House.
I can't imagine an attractive, curvy
brick
girl
house.
being an
Brick
Ick House.
house.
No,
You're
it's got to be a
right.
brick house,
Brick
and
house.
that's the 60s.
No, that's the 70s.
70s.
Brick
Oh,
House. Yeah.
okay.
Brick
70s,
House.
yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. Third and final. Buzzkill. What decade did buzzkill come from?
Buzzkill. Oh God. Let's see. That had to be something from the. That's got to be 60s. That's from the from when people were smoking weed, and they'd run into somebody that was bringing them down.
Mm-mm.
No.
Nope, sooner.
60s.
Well, later than 60s.
Later. Oh, 70s. Got to be.
Later.
Oh God.
90s.
90s.
Buzzkill.
Yeah.
Buzzkill was
Buzzkill.
like really popular in the 90s.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
I was.
Although,
I was,
I
was-
would
I
have
was
thought
hearing-
the 60s too.
I was hearing that.
But,
very
I
early on.
look up stuff on the internet. And,
Yeah.
the internet's full of bullshit anyway.
Right,
They don't
right.
know what
Right.
they're talking
Okay.
about. Half these people that wrote this stuff is, they're 20 years old. What do
They
know?
miss things like
Right.
Ick House, right? They drop things.
They drop things.
They
Instead of
forget
brick
it.
house, they say Ick House.
All right. How about the modern one, Stephanie? What's
Okay,
the modern phrase?
one is
What does it mean?
chuggy.
Spell it.
Chuggy.
Chuggy.
How do you spell that?
Cheugy. Pronounced chuggy.
Chuggy.
Maria and I were saying, this relates to us. No.
Exactly.
No fucking idea. No.
It is a term used for someone confidently using an outdated trend that was only cool a long time ago, but is now considered basic or super mainstream.
Oh my God, that's me.
What a
That's
buzzkill.
us. We are all chuggy. And for that, cheers to
We
chuggy.
could do the chuggy chug.
Cheers. Let's do the chuggy chug. All right. Chug, chug, chug. Awesome.
Well, Steve, thank you so much for being our guest.
It was my pleasure.
And I really do believe that you did change the world.
Yes, you have.
You know, and you
You
are
walk the walk,
inspirational.
baby.
You walk
You don't
not
just talk the
talk, dude. Exactly. And thank you for listening to this segment of Creative Conversations with Generation Jones. Don't forget to follow us on social media. We are on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok.
Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next podcast. And as my Aunt Millie said, shoulders back, knockers up.
Cheers.
Cheers. And that's a wrap.
That's a wrap.